The Grand Theater hummed with anticipation as London's elite filled the velvet seats. Princess Isabella adjusted her emerald tiara one final time, watching from behind the heavy curtains as guests settled into their places. Tonight's Royal Charity Gala would raise funds for children's hospitals across the kingdom, but the princess felt the familiar weight of duty pressing on her shoulders. "Your Highness, we're ready for your entrance," whispered her private secretary, Margaret, appearing at her elbow with a practiced smile. Isabella nodded, smoothing the silk fabric of her midnight blue gown. At 28, she had attended hundreds of these events, each one a careful dance of protocol and public expectation. Yet something about tonight felt different. Perhaps it was the genuine excitement in the children's faces she had visited at the hospital yesterday, or maybe the growing realization that her royal duties often kept her at arm's length from the very people she wanted to help. The orchestra began the opening melody as Isabella made her way to the royal box. Applause rippled through the theater, cameras flashed discreetly from designated areas, and she offered her practiced wave to the crowd. Her younger brother, Prince Edmund, was already seated, scrolling through his phone with barely concealed boredom. "Another thrilling evening of watching other people perform," he muttered as she settled beside him. "Edmund, please," Isabella whispered, though she understood his sentiment. Their lives were often about observing rather than participating, supporting causes from a careful distance that maintained royal dignity, but sometimes felt hollow. The evening's program began with a classical pianist whose fingers danced across the keys with remarkable skill. Isabella found herself genuinely moved by the performance, remembering her own abandoned piano lessons from childhood. She had shown promise, her instructor had said, but royal schedules and public appearances had gradually consumed the time she once spent creating music. Next came a young ballet dancer whose story of overcoming poverty to attend the Royal Academy brought tears to many eyes in the audience. Isabella watched the graceful movements and thought about the dreams that royal birth had both fulfilled and constrained for her own life. During the intermission, she mingled with guests in the grand foyer, accepting gratitude for her patronage of various charities and listening to updates on fundraising goals. The conversations followed familiar patterns: polite inquiries about her health, updates on charitable work, and carefully worded requests for future royal support. "Your Highness," approached Lord Chancellor Harrison, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Matthews from Children's Medical Research Foundation. She's been working on some remarkable advances in pediatric care." Isabella extended her gloved hand, genuinely interested in hearing about the work that her patronage helped support. Dr. Matthews spoke passionately about new treatments and the difference that funding made for young patients. For a moment, Isabella forgot about cameras and protocols, absorbed in learning about real impact being made in children's lives. "The families we serve are so grateful for your support, Your Highness. Many of them express how much it means to know that someone in your position genuinely cares about their children's well-being." The word struck Isabella deeply. She did care, perhaps more than many people realized. But sometimes the formal structure of royal charity work made her feel like a beautiful figurehead rather than someone making a real difference. As the lights dimmed for the second half, Isabella returned to her seat with a thoughtful expression. The next performer was someone she had heard about, but never seen. Jessica Rivers, a singer-songwriter who had risen from performing in small clubs to becoming one of the country's most beloved artists. Her music spoke to people from all walks of life, and her personal story of overcoming addiction and finding purpose through helping others had inspired millions. Jessica walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress, her short blonde hair catching the stage lights. She carried an acoustic guitar and approached the microphone with none of the theatrical flourish common to many performers. Instead, there was something authentic and vulnerable about her presence that immediately commanded attention. "Good evening, everyone," Jessica said, her voice carrying clearly through the theater. "I'm honored to be here tonight, supporting such an important cause. Before I sing, I want to share something with you." She paused, looking out at the audience with genuine warmth. 3 years ago, I was performing in subway stations for spare change, struggling with addiction, and feeling like I had lost everything that mattered. Tonight, I'm standing on this stage not because I'm special, but because people believed in second chances and the power of music to heal. Isabella leaned forward slightly, struck by the singer's honesty. In her world, personal struggles were carefully managed by public relations teams, never shared so openly. This first song is for everyone who has felt invisible, who has struggled to find their voice, and who believes that music can change lives. Jessica continued, adjusting her guitar. It's called Finding Light. The melody began softly, Jessica's voice carrying a raw emotion that seemed to reach every corner of the theater. The lyrics spoke of darkness and hope, of falling down and finding the strength to stand again. Isabella found herself completely absorbed in the performance, feeling something stir within her that had been dormant for years. As Jessica sang about finding purpose through helping others, about using pain as fuel for positive change, Isabella realized she was witnessing something rare in her world: complete authenticity. There were no careful speeches written by others, no rehearsed responses to anticipated questions. Just one person sharing her truth with the hope that it might help someone else. The song ended to thunderous applause, but Jessica seemed almost surprised by the reaction. She smiled genuinely, not the practiced smile Isabella knew so well from her own public appearances, but the natural expression of someone who truly loved what they were doing. "Thank you," Jessica said simply. "Music saved my life, and tonight, together, we're helping to save children's lives. That's what real magic looks like." She launched into her second song, an upbeat melody about community and connection. Isabella watched, fascinated, as Jessica's personality seemed to fill the entire theater. She moved naturally, smiled genuinely, and connected with the audience in a way that seemed effortless but was clearly the result of authentic passion for her craft. During the song, Jessica's eyes swept across the audience, and, for just a moment, they met Isabella's. The princess felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, not because they had met before, but because she saw something in Jessica's expression that she recognized from her own reflection during quiet moments. The desire to make a real difference, to connect meaningfully with others. The moment passed quickly as Jessica continued her performance, but Isabella found herself thinking about that brief connection. When was the last time she had felt so immediately understood by a complete stranger? When had she last encountered someone who seemed to carry their values so openly, without the careful layers of protection that royal life demanded? As Jessica finished her set with a haunting ballad about hope persisting through difficulty, Isabella realized that something had shifted for her during this performance. She had come to the theater tonight expecting another formal charity event, another evening of careful protocol and polite conversation. Instead, she had encountered something that reminded her of why she had always been drawn to charitable work in the first place: the possibility of genuine human connection and real impact. The applause was deafening as Jessica took her bow, but she seemed more focused on the message than the acclaim. She looked out at the audience with gratitude and said, "Thank you for opening your hearts tonight. Remember, we all have the power to be someone's light in the darkness." As the evening continued with additional performers, Isabella found her attention drifting back to Jessica's words and the authentic emotion in her voice. She thought about her own role, the platform she had been given by birth, and how she might use it more meaningfully. The carefully managed distance that royal protocol required suddenly felt less like protection and more like a barrier between her and the work she truly wanted to do. When the formal performances ended, Isabella knew she would join the traditional reception, where she would meet the performers and thank them for their participation. But for the first time in years, she found herself genuinely looking forward to a conversation with someone she had just met, curious about the person behind the authentic performance she had witnessed. The evening was far from over, but already Isabella sensed that something important was beginning, something that might help her find her own voice in the work that mattered most to her. The reception hall glowed with warm golden light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. Isabella moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations on another successful charity event and expressing gratitude to the evening's sponsors. Yet her thoughts kept returning to Jessica's performance, to the genuine emotion she had witnessed on stage. "Your Highness," Margaret appeared at her side. "The performers are gathered in the green room. Shall I arrange the traditional meet and greet?" Isabella nodded, but felt an unusual flutter of nervousness. These post-performance meetings typically followed a comfortable pattern: brief conversations, photo opportunities, and expressions of mutual appreciation. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't quite explain why. The green room buzzed with the energy that always followed successful performances. Isabella entered to warm applause from the evening's artists, each of whom had contributed their talents to raise funds for children's hospitals. She began her rounds, speaking with the classical pianist about his upcoming concert tour, congratulating the young ballet dancer on her beautiful performance, and thanking a comedy duo for bringing laughter to such an important evening. Jessica stood near the back of the room, changed from her performance dress into dark jeans and a simple white blouse. She was speaking quietly with one of the sound technicians, thanking him for his work during her set. Isabella noticed how she took time to acknowledge the behind-the-scenes staff, something many performers overlooked in the excitement of meeting royalty. As Isabella approached, Jessica looked up and offered a genuine smile. Up close, the princess could see the small details that hadn't been visible from the royal box: the tiny scar above Jessica's left eyebrow, the calluses on her fingertips from years of guitar playing, the way her eyes seemed to hold both wisdom and vulnerability. "Ms. Rivers," Isabella said, extending her hand, "thank you for such a moving performance tonight. Your music was truly exceptional." Jessica accepted the handshake with a slight curtsy, but her manner remained natural and unaffected. "Your Highness, thank you for supporting this cause. I've seen the impact your children's hospital patronage has had on families. It means everything to them." Isabella was struck by how Jessica immediately redirected attention to the charitable work rather than accepting personal praise. "Please, tell me about your experience with children's hospitals. Have you visited them personally?" "I have," Jessica replied, her expression growing thoughtful. "After my recovery, I started volunteering at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Music therapy became a way for me to give back while continuing my own healing. Some of my most meaningful performances have been for audiences of 6 or 7 children in hospital playrooms." The genuine passion in Jessica's voice reminded Isabella of her own feelings during hospital visits, the way interactions with young patients cut through all pretense and reach something essential about purpose and connection. "I find those visits deeply moving as well," Isabella said, surprising herself with how easily honesty came in Jessica's presence. "Sometimes I wish I could do more than ceremonial appearances. The children I meet inspire me, but I often wonder if my visits make a real difference in their daily lives." Jessica studied the princess's face with interest. "Your Highness, if I may say so, I think you underestimate your impact. When I mentioned your patronage to children at the hospital, their faces lit up. You represent hope to them, proof that important people care about their struggles." Their conversation was interrupted by a photographer requesting pictures with each performer, but Isabella found herself hoping for more time to talk with Jessica. There was something refreshing about her directness, the way she spoke about meaningful work without the careful language Isabella was accustomed to in her professional interactions. As the photographer arranged group shots and individual photos with each artist, Isabella watched Jessica interact with the other performers. She praised the ballet dancer's technique with specific knowledge of dance training, discussed musical theory with the pianist, and made the comedy duo laugh with quick wit. Jessica seemed genuinely interested in learning about others' creative processes rather than focusing on her own accomplishments. During a brief pause in the photography session, Jessica approached Isabella again. "Your Highness, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but I wanted to ask about your own musical background. When you listened to the performances tonight, I noticed you seemed to have genuine appreciation for the technical aspects. Isabella felt a small thrill of being recognized for something beyond her royal status. I studied piano as a child and still play occasionally, though not as much as I would like. Royal schedules have a way of crowding out personal pursuits. Music has a way of calling us back when we're ready, Jessica said gently. I went years without playing during my darkest period, but the melodies were always there waiting when I found my way home to them. The metaphor struck Isabella deeply. She had often felt that way about many aspects of her authentic self, that they were waiting for her to find time and space to reconnect with them beneath the layers of duty and protocol. Ms. Rivers, Isabella began, then paused. Jessica, if I may call you that, I was wondering if you would be interested in visiting one of the children's hospitals with me sometime. Not for a formal event or photo opportunity, but simply to share music with the children who would benefit from it. Jessica's face brightened immediately. Your Highness, I would be honored. Some of my most meaningful experiences have come from those informal moments with children who are fighting such difficult battles. Margaret appeared at Isabella's elbow, the familiar signal that the evening's schedule required her to move on to the next engagement. But Isabella found herself reluctant to end this conversation, the first she'd had in months that felt genuinely connected to her personal values rather than her public role. I'll have my office contact you about arranging a visit, Isabella said, meaning it sincerely. Thank you again for tonight's performance, and for reminding me why this work matters so much. As Isabella moved toward the door, she heard Jessica quietly say, Thank you for seeing the person behind the title, Your Highness. That's not something I expected tonight. The words followed Isabella as she continued through the evening's remaining obligations. A brief meeting with major donors, final photographs with the organizing committee, and the careful departure ritual that marked the end of another royal engagement. But Jessica's presence had introduced something unexpected into the familiar patterns. During the car ride back to the palace, Isabella found herself humming one of Jessica's melodies, the haunting tune about finding light in darkness. Margaret reviewed the evening's success metrics, funds raised, positive media coverage, successful networking connections made. But Isabella's thoughts wandered to more personal measures of success. When had she last met someone who challenged her to think differently about her role? When had she encountered authenticity that made her want to explore her own genuine responses to the world? Jessica's openness about her struggles and recovery had created space for Isabella to acknowledge her own questions about purpose and impact. Back in her private quarters, Isabella sat at the piano she rarely touched anymore. Her fingers found the keys tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as muscle memory returned. She played a simple melody, one of the first pieces she had learned as a child, and thought about Jessica's words regarding music calling people back when they were ready. Perhaps readiness was something she could choose rather than wait for. Perhaps authenticity was a practice that could be developed alongside duty rather than in competition with it. The evening had shown her a different way of being present with important work, of connecting personally while maintaining professionalism. As Isabella played, she began to imagine what it might look like to bring more of her genuine self to her royal responsibilities. The hospital visit she had proposed to Jessica could be the beginning of something new, a way of engaging with charitable work that honored both her position and her personal desire to make meaningful connections. The melody filled her private sitting room, mixing with her thoughts about authentic service, genuine connection, and the possibility that her role might expand to include more personal expressions of care and support. For the first time in years, Isabella fell asleep planning something that excited rather than merely obligated her. In her small apartment across London, Jessica was experiencing her own moments of reflection about the evening's unexpected conversation. She had performed for royalty before, but had never encountered someone who seemed so genuinely interested in the work behind the titles and ceremonies. Princess Isabella's question about her own impact had revealed someone wrestling with questions about purpose and authenticity that Jessica understood deeply. Both women went to sleep that night wondering about the possibility that their chance meeting might develop into something meaningful. Not because of their public roles, but because of shared values and genuine mutual respect that had emerged in a brief but significant conversation. 2 weeks after the charity gala, Isabella stood outside St. Mary's Children's Hospital holding a small acoustic guitar case. Margaret had initially resisted the informal nature of this visit, suggesting a more traditional royal appearance with proper media coverage. But Isabella had insisted on something simpler, just herself, Jessica, and whatever music they could share with children who needed moments of joy. Jessica arrived precisely on time, carrying her own guitar and a warm smile that immediately put Isabella at ease. She wore dark jeans and a soft green sweater, her casual appearance making the princess suddenly self-conscious about her own carefully chosen outfit, a navy dress that struck a balance between approachable and appropriately royal. "Your Highness," Jessica said with a gentle curtsy, "thank you for making this happen. I've been looking forward to it since our conversation. Please, call me Isabella when we're not in formal settings," the princess replied, surprising herself with the request. "I've been practicing guitar pieces all week. I hope I don't embarrass myself." Jessica's laugh was genuine and encouraging. Music isn't about perfection, especially when we're sharing it with children. They respond to authenticity more than technical skill. Dr. Patricia Lewis, the hospital's chief pediatrician, greeted them at the entrance with evident excitement. "Your Highness, Ms. Rivers, the children are thrilled that you're here. We've gathered those who are well enough to participate in our main playroom, and we can visit individual patients who can't leave their rooms." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Isabella noticed how Jessica naturally interacted with staff members they passed, greeting nurses by name, asking about patients she remembered from previous visits, showing genuine interest in their work. It was a level of personal engagement that Isabella admired, but had rarely experienced in her own hospital visits, which typically involved careful protocols and pre-planned interactions. The playroom was decorated with colorful murals and filled with toys, books, and musical instruments. About 15 children of various ages were gathered on cushions and in wheelchairs, some connected to mobile 4-poles, others showing the effects of treatments that had taken their hair or energy. But their faces were bright with anticipation. "Hello, everyone," Jessica said, settling cross-legged on the floor among them. "This is my friend Isabella, and we brought some music to share with you today." Isabella was touched by the simple introduction that emphasized friendship over titles. She sat down beside Jessica, initially feeling awkward about her formal dress and careful posture, then gradually relaxing as the children's natural enthusiasm drew her in. "What kind of songs do you like?" Isabella asked a girl of about 8 who was wearing a colorful headscarf and had tubes connected to a small machine beside her wheelchair. "I like happy songs," the girl replied with a shy smile. "But also sad songs that make you feel better afterward." Jessica nodded understanding. "I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes we need music that matches how we're feeling before it can help us feel different." She began with a gentle melody, something hopeful but not overly cheerful. Her voice carried through the playroom, and Isabella watched as children who had been restless or tired began to focus on the music. Some swayed slightly, others closed their eyes and listened intently. When Jessica finished the song, she looked at Isabella encouragingly. "Would you like to play something?" Isabella's heart raced slightly, but she saw the expectant faces around her and realized that any nervousness she felt was insignificant compared to what these children faced daily. She began a simple piece, one of the melodies she had practiced throughout the week. Her playing was careful rather than confident at first, but as she continued, she began to feel the same sense of connection she had experienced listening to Jessica perform at the gala. The children listened attentively, and she found herself playing with growing expressiveness. "That was beautiful," said a boy who appeared to be about 12, his arm in a cast, and his leg elevated on a pillow. "Do you know any songs we could sing along with?" Isabella looked at Jessica, who immediately understood. "Let's try something everyone might know," Jessica suggested, launching into a popular melody that had children singing within moments. The next hour passed in a way Isabella had never experienced during royal duties. They sang, played simple rhythm games, and listened as some of the children shared their own favorite songs or hummed melodies they had created during long nights in the hospital. Isabella found herself laughing naturally, encouraging shy participants, and feeling genuinely useful in a way that formal ribbon cuttings never provided. During a quiet moment, Jessica played a gentle instrumental piece while some of the younger children rested. Isabella noticed how the music seemed to create a peaceful atmosphere that was both energizing and calming. She began to understand what Jessica had meant about music's healing power, not as an abstract concept, but as something tangible happening in real time. "Isabella," whispered the 8-year-old girl in the wheelchair, "will you play that pretty song again? The one that sounded like morning time." The request, so simple and direct, touched Isabella deeply. She repeated the piece, this time with more confidence and personal expression. When she finished, several children asked for just one more, and she realized that somewhere during the afternoon, her nervousness had transformed into genuine joy. After the group session, they visited individual patients who couldn't leave their rooms. Isabella watched Jessica adapt her approach for each child, playing soft background music for a toddler having a difficult day, engaging a teenager in conversation about songwriting, sitting quietly with a boy who was too weak to participate but seemed comforted by their presence. In one room, they met Sarah, a 14-year-old who had been hospitalized for several months with a rare condition. She was alert and articulate, but Isabella could see the weariness in her eyes that came from dealing with serious illness for an extended period. "I've been following your music career," Sarah said to Jessica, "and I saw the pictures from the Royal Gala. I never expected to meet you both here. We wanted to come," Isabella said simply. "The work you children are doing here, fighting so hard every day, inspires us. We hope music can provide a little comfort during difficult times." Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression they had seen from her. "Music does help. Sometimes when treatments are really hard, I imagine I'm at a concert or performing on stage instead of lying in a hospital bed." Jessica leaned forward with interest. "Do you write songs or play instruments?" "I write lyrics sometimes, but I've never put them to music. I used to play piano before I got sick, but my fingers don't work as well now because of the medications." Without hesitation, Jessica pulled out her guitar. "Would you like to try putting one of your poems to music? We could work on it together." What followed was one of the most meaningful musical collaborations Isabella had ever witnessed. Sarah shared hesitant verses about finding courage when everything felt scary, and Jessica helped her discover melodies that matched the emotional content of her words. Isabella added simple piano accompaniment on the small keyboard in Sarah's room, and together they created something beautiful and uniquely Sarah's own. As they prepared to leave Sarah's room, the teenager looked at them both with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for making me feel like more than just a patient today. I felt like an artist again." Isabella hugged Sarah gently, feeling the profound truth in her words. The afternoon had reminded her that healing wasn't just about medical treatments. It was about maintaining connection to the parts of ourselves that make us feel fully human. Walking through the hospital corridors afterward, Isabella reflected on how different this experience had been from her typical royal engagements. Instead of observing charitable work from a formal distance, she had participated in creating something meaningful. Instead of representing the crown's support for important causes, she had offered her personal presence and skills. "Thank you for encouraging me to do this," Isabella said to Jessica as they reached the hospital entrance. "I learned something important today about what my role could include." Jessica smiled warmly. "You have a natural gift for connecting with people, Isabella." The children responded to your authenticity, not your title. "I think there are many ways you could use music as part of your charitable work." As they parted ways, Isabella felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had been missing from her royal duties for years. She had discovered that her personal interests and skills could enhance rather than compete with her formal responsibilities. More importantly, she had experienced the joy of genuine service, giving something of herself rather than merely representing institutional support. The drive back to the palace gave her time to process the afternoon's experiences and consider how she might integrate this more personal approach into her ongoing charitable work. For the first time in years, she felt excited about the possibilities her position offered for making authentic connections and meaningful contributions to causes that mattered deeply to her. That evening, she called Jessica to thank her again and to propose making these informal hospital visits a regular occurrence. Their conversation lasted much longer than either had expected, covering everything from musical techniques to philosophies of service. And both women ended the call feeling that they had discovered not just a successful charitable collaboration, but the beginning of a genuine friendship. 3 months had passed since Isabella and Jessica's first hospital visit together, and their informal musical sessions had grown into something neither had originally imagined. What began as occasional visits to St. Mary's had expanded to include 3 other children's hospitals, a music therapy program, and a small but dedicated group of volunteer musicians who joined their efforts. Isabella stood in her private office reviewing proposals for a more formal charitable foundation that could support their expanding work. The documents spread across her desk represented months of planning with legal advisors, charitable organizations experts, and healthcare administrators. But the most important consultation had been with Jessica, whose practical experience and authentic passion had shaped every aspect of their vision. Margaret knocked and entered with her usual efficiency. "Your Highness, Ms. Rivers has arrived for your meeting. Shall I show her in?" "Please, and Margaret, we'll need privacy for the next 2 hours. This is quite an important discussion." Jessica entered carrying a folder and wearing the warm smile that had become so familiar to Isabella over their months of friendship. She had dressed more formally today in dark slacks and a professional blouse, understanding the significance of their meeting, but her manner remained as natural as ever. "Isabella," she said, accepting the princess's gesture to sit in the comfortable chairs by the window rather than at the formal desk. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week, and I have some ideas about the foundation structure." Isabella felt the familiar sense of energizing collaboration that had marked all their planning sessions. "I'm eager to hear them. The legal team has drafted the preliminary documents, but I want to make sure we're capturing the spirit of what we've experienced during our hospital visits." Jessica opened her folder and pulled out handwritten notes covered with her neat script. "I've been talking with music therapists, child life specialists, and some of the families we've met. Here's what I think makes our approach different from traditional charitable music programs." She leaned forward with evident enthusiasm. "Most musical charity work involves performers visiting hospitals to entertain patients. That's valuable, but what we've been doing is more collaborative. We're helping children participate in creating music, not just listening to it." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I've noticed that difference too. When Sarah wrote that song with us, or when little Marcus learned to play simple rhythms despite his limited mobility, they weren't just receiving something. They were contributing their own creativity." "Exactly," Jessica continued, "and that's therapeutic in a way that goes beyond entertainment. When children can express themselves musically, they're accessing parts of their identity that illness can't touch." Isabella reached for her own notes, pages filled with observations from their hospital visits and conversations with healthcare staff. Dr. Lewis mentioned that several children we've worked with have shown improved emotional resilience during difficult treatments. She thinks the musical collaboration gives them a sense of agency and accomplishment that's hard to find in other aspects of hospital life. They spent the next hour refining their vision for the foundation, which they had decided to call Harmony in Healing. Unlike traditional charitable foundations that operated at arm's length from their work, this organization would actively involve both Isabella and Jessica in direct service while also supporting other musicians and hospitals interested in collaborative music therapy programs. "I want to discuss something that might be sensitive," Jessica said, her tone becoming more serious. "The media attention that comes with your involvement brings wonderful visibility to this work, but I've been wondering how to make sure it doesn't overshadow the children's experiences." Isabella appreciated Jessica's directness about this challenge. "I've been thinking about that too. Some of our most meaningful moments have happened when there were no cameras present, when children felt free to be vulnerable or silly without worrying about public attention. What if we created 2 tracks of programming?" Jessica suggested. "Public events that help raise awareness and funds, but also private sessions where children can engage without any media presence. The foundation could support both approaches." "That's brilliant," Isabella said, making notes. "We could have formal concerts and fundraising events, but also protect intimate therapeutic sessions. Children and families could choose their level of public involvement." Their conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock, and Margaret entered with tea and the news that several important calls had come in regarding their foundation planning. "Your Highness," Margaret said, "Lord Harrison from the Children's Medical Research Foundation would like to discuss partnership opportunities. Dr. Lewis from St. Mary's called about expanding the program to their new wing. And there's been a call from the Royal Academy of Music about educational collaboration." Isabella felt a thrill of excitement at the growing interest in their work, but also some anxiety about maintaining the personal, authentic approach that had made their efforts so meaningful. After Margaret left, Jessica seemed to read her thoughts. "The growth is exciting, but we'll need to be careful not to lose what makes this special. Bureaucracy has a way of suffocating the very creativity we're trying to nurture." "I've been thinking about that challenge," Isabella said. "What if we start small, but establish clear principles from the beginning? We could pilot our approach thoroughly before expanding, making sure we understand how to maintain authenticity at larger scales." Jessica smiled. "You've really thought this through. I sometimes forget that you have extensive experience with charitable organizations, even if this particular approach is new." Isabella laughed. "Years of formal charity work have taught me as much about what doesn't work as what does. I know how easy it is for good intentions to get lost in administrative complexity." They turned to reviewing the draft foundation documents, and Isabella was struck by how naturally they collaborated on complex details. Jessica's practical experience with music therapy and community work complemented Isabella's understanding of organizational structures and funding mechanisms. Neither tried to defer to the other's expertise. Instead, they built on each other's knowledge to create something neither could have developed alone. "Here's a section I particularly want to discuss," Isabella said, pointing to language about volunteer recruitment. "I think we should prioritize recruiting musicians who have personal experience with healthcare challenges or recovery, like your own background with addiction recovery." Jessica considered this thoughtfully. "That could be powerful, but we need to be careful about exploitation. Musicians shouldn't feel pressured to share personal struggles just to qualify for volunteer work." "You're absolutely right," Isabella agreed. "What if we focus on recruiting people who are motivated by authentic connection rather than performers looking for publicity opportunities? The personal experience could be valuable, but not required." As their meeting continued, both women found themselves energized by the planning process. They were creating something that honored their different backgrounds and skills while serving children who had taught them both about resilience and creativity. Near the end of their time together, Jessica brought up a topic that had been on her mind for weeks. "Isabella, I want you to know how much these months have meant to me personally. This work has become central to my sense of purpose, but beyond that, your friendship has enriched my life in ways I couldn't have expected." Isabella felt a warmth that went beyond professional satisfaction. "I feel the same way, Jessica. You've helped me discover parts of myself that I had almost forgotten existed. This collaboration has shown me what royal service can look like when it's aligned with personal authenticity." They spent their final minutes discussing practical next steps, meetings with legal advisors, conversations with hospital administrators, and the development of training materials for volunteer musicians. But underneath the logistical planning was a shared excitement about the possibilities their foundation could create for children, families, and healthcare communities. As Jessica prepared to leave, she turned back with a thoughtful expression. When I performed at that charity gala 3 months ago, I never imagined it would lead to something like this. Sometimes the most important developments in our lives begin with unexpected connections. Isabella nodded, thinking about how dramatically her understanding of her own role had evolved since that evening. I keep thinking about something one of the children said last week, that music helps her remember who she is when illness makes everything else feel different. I think this work has helped me remember who I am too. After Jessica left, Isabella spent time alone in her office reviewing their plans and reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. The foundation documents represented more than charitable work. They symbolized her discovery of how to integrate personal passion with royal responsibility, how to use her platform for authentic service rather than merely ceremonial representation. She picked up her phone to call the palace's legal department about finalizing their application papers, but paused for a moment to appreciate how much had changed since that night when she had first heard Jessica perform. Both women had found their voices in ways they hadn't expected, and together they were creating opportunities for children to find their voices too. The work ahead would be challenging, requiring careful balance between public attention and private healing, between organizational growth and authentic connection. But Isabella felt confident that the foundation they were building together would serve children while honoring the genuine friendship and shared values that had made it possible. 1 year after their first meeting at the charity gala, Isabella and Jessica stood together on the same stage where their friendship had begun. But tonight was different. They were not performer and audience member, but collaborative partners preparing to launch their Harmony and Healing Foundation with a benefit concert that would demonstrate their innovative approach to music therapy. The theater was filled not only with London's charitable elite, but also with families they had worked with, healthcare professionals who had witnessed their programs, and volunteer musicians who had joined their efforts. Most meaningful to both women were the reserved sections for children from the hospitals they visited, many of whom would participate in tonight's performance. Isabella adjusted her midnight blue dress, the same one she had worn to that first gala, and felt the profound difference in her confidence and purpose. Tonight, she would not merely observe from the royal box, but would perform alongside Jessica and the children who had taught them both about resilience and creativity. "Are you nervous?" Jessica asked, approaching with her guitar case and wearing a silver dress that struck an elegant balance between performance attire and the accessibility that characterized all her interactions. "Excited rather than nervous," Isabella replied honestly. "A year ago, I would have been terrified to perform publicly. Now I'm eager to share what we've learned with people who can help us expand this work." The evening began with Jessica performing alone, her voice carrying the same authentic emotion that had first captured Isabella's attention. But tonight her songs had evolved to include pieces created collaboratively with children in their programs, melodies that carried stories of hope discovered in hospital rooms and courage found in creative expression. After Jessica's opening set, Isabella joined her on stage carrying her acoustic guitar. A year of practice and collaboration had transformed her from a careful, technically correct player into someone who could express genuine emotion through music. Together, they performed a song that had emerged from their work with Sarah, the 14-year-old poet whose lyrics had inspired one of their most successful therapeutic sessions. This next piece was created by a remarkable young woman who taught us that creativity persists even in the most challenging circumstances, Isabella told the audience. Sarah's words remind us that healing involves more than medical treatment. It requires maintaining connection to the parts of ourselves that make us uniquely human. As they played Sarah's song, Isabella saw the teenager in the audience, her health much improved, but her emotional wisdom evident in the way she listened to her own words being shared with hundreds of people. The moment encapsulated everything the foundation represented, children's voices being amplified rather than replaced, their creativity being celebrated rather than pitted. The evening's centerpiece was a collaborative performance involving 12 children from various hospitals, each contributing instruments, vocals, or spoken word pieces to a musical story about finding light in darkness. Some performed from wheelchairs, others showed the effects of treatments that had affected their appearance or energy, but all demonstrated the creative vitality that their programs aimed to nurture. Isabella watched from the side of the stage as 8-year-old Marcus, whose limited mobility had initially made musical participation seem impossible, used adaptive instruments to create rhythmic patterns that provided the foundation for his classmates' melodies. His concentrated expression and evident pride reminded her why their work mattered more than any formal charitable obligation she had ever fulfilled. When Jessica introduced Isabella to perform a solo piece, the princess felt none of the anxiety that had characterized her public appearances for years. Instead, she experienced the same sense of authentic connection that marked her hospital visits and foundation planning sessions. The song she had chosen was one she had written herself over the past months, lyrics inspired by her evolving understanding of what meaningful service could include. The melody spoke of discovering unexpected paths to purpose, of finding genuine connection through shared creativity, and of learning that authenticity enhanced rather than compromised professional responsibilities. While the audience likely heard it as a song about charitable work, Isabella knew it also expressed her personal journey toward integration of public duty and private passion. As she finished the song to warm applause, Isabella saw Jessica's encouraging smile and felt the deep satisfaction that came from using her platform to highlight others' contributions rather than seeking personal acclaim. The evening was about the foundation's work, the children's creativity, and the possibilities their collaboration could create for other healthcare communities. The formal program concluded with all the evening's participants on stage together: children, musicians, healthcare professionals, and foundation supporters. Jessica led them in a song that had become an unofficial anthem for their work, a melody about different voices creating harmony when they came together in common purpose. Looking out at the audience, Isabella saw Lord Harrison from the Children's Medical Research Foundation, Dr. Lewis from St. Mary's Hospital, representatives from the Royal Academy of Music, and dozens of other potential partners who could help expand their programming. But more importantly, she saw families whose lives had been touched by their work and children whose creativity had inspired every aspect of the foundation's development. During the reception that followed, Isabella moved through the crowd with a confidence and joy that marked how much had changed since the previous year's gala. Conversations flowed naturally between discussions of program expansion, funding partnerships, and personal stories from families who had participated in their sessions. Your Highness approached Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a music therapist from Manchester Children's Hospital. I've been following your foundation's work with great interest. We would love to explore implementing similar programming in our facility. Isabella engaged enthusiastically in the conversation, sharing practical insights about their approach while learning about Dr. Martinez's existing music therapy programs. These discussions had become some of her favorite aspects of foundation work, exchanging ideas with professionals who shared their commitment to innovative patient care. Nearby, Jessica was speaking with a group of volunteer musicians who had traveled from different cities to attend the concert. Isabella could hear her emphasizing the collaborative nature of their approach, explaining how musicians could support children's creativity rather than simply providing entertainment. The most rewarding moments happen when children surprise themselves with their own capabilities, Jessica was saying. Our role is creating safe spaces for that discovery, not performing for passive audiences. As the evening progressed, Isabella found herself in conversation with parents whose children had participated in their programs. These interactions were always the most meaningful, hearing directly about the impact their work had on families navigating difficult medical journeys. Princess Isabella, said Mrs. Thompson, whose son had been one of their first collaborators, I wanted to thank you for seeing Jamie as an artist, not just a patient. The confidence he gained from your music sessions has helped him advocate for himself throughout his treatment. Such comments reminded Isabella why she had felt so drawn to this more personal approach to charitable work. Traditional royal patronage provided important institutional support for healthcare organizations, but these direct relationships with families created opportunities for mutual learning and genuine connection. Near the end of the evening, Isabella and Jessica found a quiet moment together in the theater's green room, both reflecting on how far they had traveled from their first meeting in this same space a year earlier. "I keep thinking about something you said that first night," Isabella told Jessica, "about music calling us back when we're ready. I think this whole experience has been about both of us finding our way back to parts of ourselves we had lost touch with." Jessica smiled thoughtfully. "For me, it's been about discovering that recovery doesn't just mean getting healthy. It means finding meaningful ways to use your experiences to help others. This foundation has given my personal journey a purpose I never expected. And for me," Isabella continued, "it's been about learning that authenticity enhances rather than compromises professional effectiveness. I'm a better representative of the crown when I'm able to engage personally with the work I'm supporting." As they prepared to leave the theater, both women acknowledged that tonight's event marked both a celebration of their first year's accomplishments and the beginning of much larger possibilities. The foundation had received commitments for expansion into 6 additional hospitals, funding pledges that would support comprehensive program development, and expressions of interest from international healthcare organizations. But beyond the measurable successes, they had demonstrated that meaningful charitable work could emerge from genuine friendship, that personal authenticity could enhance public service, and that creative collaboration could provide healing that went beyond traditional medical approaches. Walking out of the theater together, Isabella reflected on how completely her understanding of her role had evolved. She was still Princess Isabella, still committed to her royal responsibilities and traditional charitable patronages. But she was also a musician, a foundation co-founder, and a friend whose most important work emerged from personal connections rather than formal obligations. Jessica, meanwhile, had discovered that her recovery journey and artistic talents could serve purposes larger than she had ever imagined. The foundation had provided structure for translating her personal healing into systematic support for others, while her friendship with Isabella had shown her that meaningful partnerships could bridge different worlds and backgrounds. As they parted ways that evening, both women carried with them the knowledge that their unexpected meeting at a charity gala had developed into something neither could have anticipated, a friendship that had transformed their individual purposes while creating opportunities for healing and creativity that would benefit children and families for years to come. Their story had begun with a brief conversation between a princess seeking more meaningful engagement with her charitable work and a musician committed to using her talents for healing. It had evolved into a demonstration that authentic collaboration between people of different backgrounds could create innovations that neither could achieve alone, and that some of the most important work in the world begins with genuine human connection rather than formal obligation. The foundation they had built together would continue growing, serving children in hospitals throughout the country and eventually expanding internationally. But its deepest success would always be measured in individual moments. Children discovering their creative voices, families finding hope through artistic expression, and healthcare communities recognizing that healing involves nurturing the whole person rather than just treating medical conditions. As Isabella returned to the palace that night, she carried with her not just the satisfaction of another successful royal engagement, but the deep fulfillment that came from work that integrated her personal values, professional responsibilities, and authentic relationships. She had found her voice, just as Jessica had found hers, and together they had created spaces for countless others to find their voices too.